Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome from my living room in beautiful Tempe, Arizona. Welcome to Ballet Arizona on Facebook Live. I hope anybody can hear me. My computer's acting a little bit funny here, and I'm not sure because I can't see myself. So I'm going to kind of cool our jets for a little bit here in the beginning and wait for some people to come on and post some questions. If you have questions, this is a live Q&A. The whole point is to talk about what goes on backstage at Ballet Arizona, what goes into putting back our productions together. And so if you have any questions, please post them and I will try to take them on. I'm seeing nobody entering the room yet. Good evening and hello. It's 2 minutes after 5 o'clock. Welcome to Ballet Arizona live on Facebook. This is my very first live stream ever, so it's going to be a bumpy ride. Buckle up. It's going to be a little like watching NASCAR, I think. Lots of opportunities for harrowing close calls and the occasional flaming crash, but I'll do my darndest. Alexandra Papazian, thank you. You seem to be the first one in, and thank you very much. Now I know that you can see me because this looks different than when I tested it today. See, I'm a newbie. It's my very first time ever. So knowing that I am actually broadcasting, I guess I'll get started. So I'm Michael Panvini. I am the Director of Production for Ballet Arizona, and I have been with Ballet Arizona since January of 2008. I came here from New York City, where previously for 15 years, I had been a touring production manager for Columbia Artists Management, Inc., and I was responsible for putting together tours of ballet companies and what we call boots and braids tours, the folk dance company of take your pick, a lot of Eastern European companies, but groups from around the world. And I toured them all over North America. Prior to that, I did Dance Theatre of Harlem and the Joffrey Ballet as a lighting supervisor. That was my foray into the dance world. And before that, I had done Broadway tours and the Magic of David Copperfield. I think there's a bio of me that got posted on the announcement for this thing that goes a little bit deeper, but that's enough for now. Looks like we got a couple of people checking in, but I'm not seeing any questions yet. What do we got going here? Sorry, I'm new, I'm green. So, for those who are joining now, and those who have already been on, but I can't tell who you are, the purpose of the discussion today is to do a question and answer. So I'm here to answer your questions about what do we do backstage at Symphony Hall, at the Orpheum Theater, at Ballet Under the Stars, or the Desert Botanical Gardens, any of the places where you are used to seeing Ballet Arizona perform. Jordan Edwards, welcome to the page. Welcome to our show. I miss you too. And what is my ballet story? What is my favorite Ballet Arizona story? I'll have to think on that for a couple of minutes. In any event, the purpose of the discussion is to answer your questions. If you do have any questions, please post them for me so I can take a look, and I'll try to get to them as quickly as I can. Weird stuff. Well, I'm going to lead into one thing because people always ask about ballet shoes. You know, when I do live question and answer sessions, people are always asking about ballet shoes, which is funny because I do a lot of other logistical things for the ballet that have nothing to do with ballet shoes, but they do take up a large part of our time because the ballerinas go through quite a few of them. All of our ballerinas get 2 ballet shoes at Ballet Arizona every week. They get 2 pairs of shoes every week of their contract plus extras if they are dancing in performance and especially if they're dancing a difficult role. But dancers, when we distribute the shoes, they are brand shiny new, and the very first thing that dancers do is start to destroy their shoes. Most people don't realize this. The very first thing that you will hear in the theater when the dancers have their brand new shoes is this, tapping on the computer to try to give you the right idea. This is them tapping their point shoes on the ground, on the concrete, on the stage to start to break them in around the edges. And then after they do that, they might take a cheese grater and run it over the front and grind the front up a little bit and sew the edges back to make it a different size platform for their toes to stand on. Every ballerina has a different routine for her shoes. They all should sew their own ribbons on themselves, but they've all got a different routine for breaking in shoes. It usually takes a little bit of time. They try to have a pair that's fresh, a pair that they're breaking in, a pair that is well worn in that they're using in rehearsals, and they kind of rotate through them as they go. Every girl's got a slightly different procedure. And one of the craziest stories, Jordan, this wasn't a non sequitur, I'm getting to you. One of the craziest stories I ever had was on tour with the Russian National Ballet back in the late 1990s. And the Bolshoi Theater makes a lot of the shoes in Russia, and this company was run by a former Bolshoi dancer, Sergei Redchenko. And so he got all of the girls' shoes from the Bolshoi Theater. And none of the girls had a fresh set of shoes in a while, and one of the girls breaks a shoe in rehearsal. Shoes can break a lot of different ways. I'm not going to go into details about that now. Her particular shoe, basically the spine underneath the arch of her foot broke, and she needed to break in a brand new pair of shoes right away because she didn't have another pair. And so she got the new pair out of the bin, and she started banging on it, and then she said, nope, it's not enough time. And we went out into the loading dock, and she literally had me run it over with the rental car. Not once, but twice. She put the shoe down under the wheel and went, go. And I ran over him, and she took him and tested him again, and nope, again. And I ran them over again. So just off the top of my head, that is one of the silliest ballet stories that I can think of, Jordan, is running over a pair of ballet shoes to break them in. Heather Juby, welcome. I hope I pronounced your name right. Have I ever taken a ballet class? I have never taken a ballet class. I've never taken open class. I hate to say it. There are some things you just can't unsee, and one of those would be me at a ballet bar. When I was in school, I took some jazz classes because I was a musical theater geek in high school. And so when I was in my teens, I did take some jazz dance classes, but I never took ballet, no. Okay, catching up on about shoes. Laura, you have about 14 pairs now? Oh my goodness. So yeah, ballet shoes, it's amazing how much time we spend on them. People don't realize. I don't know who would be watching this that has actually seen our shoe distribution center. It's quite an operation. There's a bin for every single girl, and orders come in over several months of time, and it is a whole operation. And one of our former dancers, Chelsea Teal, is the one who operates it for us right now. You want to have a former dancer doing that because they are the ones who know how to deal with the women and their shoes. Amanda Hidalgo, welcome. Has anyone ever fallen into the orchestra pit? Funny you bring it up. There are many stories like that all around, but yes, we actually have one at Ballet Arizona. It happened prior to my arrival here. It would have been, I think the accident happened in about 2006 or 2007. It was during the production of Eve Anderson's play, one of the first times around, and a city worker did in fact fall into the open orchestra pit. It's one of the reasons we have more stringent safety precautions there nowadays. And it is an ongoing thing because there's open orchestra pits in musical theater and all around the country. And there are lots of stories of people not paying close enough attention and walking into the pit. So you never know what could happen. I see a question from Jamie about driving the sleigh, the Nutcracker sleigh. Yes. On more than one occasion, we have taken our favorite electric golf cart toy because the sleigh in Nutcracker, for those of you who do not know, is actually built on a mobility scooter. And so it drives about as fast as a golf cart. It charges up like an electric golf cart would. and or a mobility scooter because it's built on a mobility scooter. And we have taken it driving down the street on right in front of Symphony Hall on more than one occasion on the sidewalk. It is true. Let's see who else is in here. What is harder to clean up, glitter or stage snow? Glitter, without any question. We hate glitter. Backstage people do not like glitter one bit. Ballet Arizona has a no glitter policy because glitter is impossible. It gets into the nap of the fabric of all of the curtains, and it gets stuck to the floor and becomes part of it. It becomes one with the ballet floor, and it is one of the things that we like the least. I would much rather deal with streamers and bigger things. Little glitter, we actually don't allow it. Our venues here in Phoenix do not allow us to put glitter on stage for exactly that reason, because it's impossible to clean up after. So the stage snow that we use for Nutcracker is actually relatively easy to clean up after, although we do find traces of it many months after we're done with our production of Nutcracker. But snow is easy because you can vacuum it up in a vacuum cleaner. It's all made out of paper. There's two different sizes of paper that we use in our paper snow. One is like little hole punch paper chads, and the others are little squares that are about a quarter to a half an inch on a side of flame-proof paper. And we literally just push it around with brooms like snow and scoop it up with snow shovels into trash pails, and then run a couple of big vacuum cleaners around, shop vacs over, and it comes right away. And Jesse George, welcome to the conversation. I'm so glad you could come. Yes, glitter is in fact the herpes of the arts world, and it never goes away. Theater people do call it that. It's theater herpes because once you have it, it's the gift that keeps right on giving. Let's see. Who else do we have here? Have I missed anybody? Have I missed anything? Nope, we're all caught up. We're all caught up. What I can't see is who total is in the room. So if you have any questions and you're just sitting there lurking, ask, please. I'm dying to answer your questions. In the meantime, I have a list. I have a list of things I can answer while I'm waiting for more questions. What does a director of production do? What is under your purview? Wow. What does a director of production not do? I basically am Ebe Anderson's right hand. I am the producer to his director. He makes all the artistic choices. He chooses what we do. He does the choreography on a new piece. But all of the logistics of it, choreography on a new piece. But all of the logistics of it, all of the scenery, all of the lighting, the costumes, the design that goes into all of those, the transportation logistics, purchasing of materials, negotiation of artists' contracts with outside artists like designers or orchestras that we might bring in to work with us, trucking and transportation, I think I said logistics, all of that kind of stuff all falls in the purview of the production department. And we also are in charge of maintaining the building on Washington Street and a warehouse in South Phoenix that most people don't even know exists. So all of that falls within the purview of the costume or of the production department. Within the production department is an onstage department, which is run by the technical director, Joe Pirto, and a costume shop that's run by Leonore Texador. And then our stage manager, Laura Cadieu, is the one who coordinates all of that when we're at the theater. Let's see. Questions about glitter. More about glitter? I'm done. I'm done with glitter. All that glitters is gold, and I'm done talking about glitter. What's my favorite production to work on, ballet or otherwise? You know, I don't have a favorite ballet. I get asked this all the time, actually, and I don't really have a favorite ballet. My least favorite ballet, I hate to tell all of you, is Nutcracker, and it's not because I don't like the ballet. Ebe Anderson's Nutcracker is a terrific ballet. It's just that we've done it 100 million times, and it is the most difficult thing that we do. So I will answer them, but all of the what is the most, what is the biggest, what is the any most question is almost certainly going to be answered by Nutcracker. And for that reason, because it is the biggest and most difficult thing that we do, it is at least the thing that I dread most. Maybe it's least favorite's not the right way to put it. I dread it until we have it all set up. And then I am never happier than when we have it put to bed. What is my favorite? It's hard to say because I like a lot of different ballets for a lot of different reasons. I've been doing ballet since 1990. I've seen a lot of ballets from a lot of different companies and a lot of different kinds of modern dance and folk dance from around the world, and I kind of get a kick out of all of it. I kind of tend to lean more towards stuff that you would see in a mixed rep program like Director's Choice or Modern Masters, a program of mixed repertoire. That's what I kind of came about on in my forays into the dance world. Started with Dance Theatre of Harlem, and they were a touring company that did all repertoire and no full-length ballets. The only full-length ballet that Dance Theatre of Harlem had when I was there was their Creole Giselle, which I did, as it turned out. But everything else were all Balanchine ballets because they were also, because of Arthur Mitchell, a Balanchine style company. And other short pieces, of course, at Dance Theatre of Harlem, they had all kinds of cool Alvin Ailey stuff and they could cross boundaries that other companies don't get away with crossing. And so they had some really, really cool, funky stuff. And so I guess if I have to go to a simple go-to, I would say all kinds of stuff in the Dance Theatre of Harlem repertoire that just nobody else would even think of doing were some of my favorite things. They had stuff that was choreographed to, like funk by Rufus Thomas that was just really very, very fun. But bigger picture, I kind of lean toward those sorts of ballets. That's not to say that I haven't done 100 million storybook ballets. I have certainly done all of the classic Canyon on many, many different companies and have seen lots of different versions of Nutcracker and Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty and Swan Lake and Giselle. And I love those too, but I kind of like the other stuff because it lets the company stretch out more. It lets more variety happen on the stage. Dwight Wolf, welcome. Let's see, David Tompkins, welcome. David Tompkins is asking, what's my favorite David Copperfield story? I'll have to table that one for a minute too and think, because there's 100 million David Copperfield stories, and most of them are not what I would call favorites. That job was probably one of the most difficult jobs I've ever had, and most of the pride in having worked for David Copperfield is having survived the experience, because that's one of the most difficult national tours that you can ever do. Heather says, DTH was your first Firebird in the 80s. Yes, that was when I was there in the late 80s, and so I worked on that very Firebird production, and in fact, gosh, I'm going to go mobile here for a minute since we're talking about it, because I have a thing on my wall. So this will spice things up. You mean this Firebird? This poster is from the tour in 1992, I believe it was, 91 or 92. We were in Munich, Germany. And so I like this poster because it was colorful and it had my friend Charmaine being the Firebird, and because it's all in German. And how much fun is that? Okay, let's see. What qualities, Elizabeth Pickens, welcome. What qualities do you look for in a Clara when casting? Well, to be honest, I don't look for any qualities in Clara because I'm not the artistic director. Eve does that. But I would say that it's about personality, it's about ability to execute the dance steps, and most important, it is about ability to fit into the costume. Most people don't realize that. The Nutcracker audition, we literally line them up by height, and a huge amount of it, and this is true in theater all over. A lot of who gets cast in what is who fits in the costume and has the right body type. Sad but true. And so we have all different sized kids' costumes. We have small, medium, and large for all those major roles like Clara and Fritz. And it all depends on the talent, but a lot of times it also depends on who fits into the costumes. Do I know David Copperfield's magic secrets? The secret is it's not magic. I hate magic. I always say that. I know all the secrets of everything that was in the show when I toured with David Copperfield, and since there's only about 12 magic tricks in the whole of history, because it's all about misdirection, and half the time it's, hey, everybody look over here, and while you're looking over here, we're doing something right out in the open in front of you, you're all looking in the other direction. So I have a really good track record at figuring out how a magic trick works. If I look at a magic trick and watch it a couple of times, I can come up with one or two good guesses at how it might work. But I only know the stuff for sure how it worked when I was on tour. And yes, I signed an agreement, and no, I can't tell you. Oh, Jesse. Yeah, never. And you're welcome, Teresa, because I know you fed that question to Jesse. For those who are watching, the answer to that is Eve Anderson does not like the ballet Carmina Burana, nor does he like the ballet Dracula, and he has expressed pretty firmly that we will not ever perform either of them. If you would like to try to persuade him otherwise, you are welcome to send him an email at, I think it's info@balletaz.org. And please, if you can lobby him into doing it, it would be an interesting thing to do. Carmina would be amazing. Yeah, I actually have done a production of Carmina Burana since we're shooting it out there. I worked with Ballet de l'Opéra de Bordeaux, and they had a version of Carmina Burana that was, I think, choreographed by Bertolozzi. It was interesting. It was cool. They had really big platform shoes for all of the archangels at the beginning and these really cool spotlights. It was kind of interesting. And of course, the music is epic, but everybody always forgets that the only part of Carmina Burana that they like is about the first 2 minutes. Because if you know Carmina Burana, those of you who are listening, it's that, it's really epic. You know, you can imagine Conan the Barbarian riding with his sword swinging over his head, and slow motion shots of, you know, scantily clad, you know, barbaric warriors with huge swords. But then that ends and it goes into this madrigal stuff for the whole rest of it that sounds nothing like the first 2 minutes, and it's really kind of weird and funky, and it's not the same piece of music. I think most people don't remember that part. They just remember the epic part of that music. When I think Carmina Burana, I think of the first 2 minutes. Nothing new yet. Let me go to my default list. Question 2 on the default list. How do you choose the ballet for a season? Well, the first thing we do is we have an artistic director. His name is Eve Anderson, and he lets us know what his ideas are for what he wants to do in a season. I am not part of the decision making other than providing budget exercises to show which things would be more expensive and more complicated, and I weigh in on that side of things, but ultimately Eve Anderson decides what it is that he thinks would be great to do artistically in any given season, and then he gives me marching orders and I go from there. David Tompkins is asking, how did we get the production of Napoli to Ballet Arizona? Well, David, as you well know, that depends on which time we did Napoli. The most recent incarnation of Napoli, which we just did in this last season, it happens that another ballet company, Oregon Ballet Theater, had built a new production. They made a really big hay out of the fact that they were the first brand new production in North America. But in fact, we were the first ones to do it in the United States. Nobody else had done the full Napoli until we did it in 2015. In 2015, we rented the entire production from the Royal Danish Ballet, and we shipped it halfway around the world in Sealand containers on ships. And there was a strike at the Port of Los Angeles that we almost didn't get through, and it was all harrowing and terrifying, and we nearly didn't have a show. And there were all kinds of scrambling and backup plans to create a fake production of Napoli in case we didn't get the scenery so that we could invent it again out of stuff made out of other ballets. Luckily, we did not have to do that, which was very happily got the stuff literally right before they closed the gates for that strike. But after that experience, you know, it was very expensive, and we were very, very wary of putting things on boats. Not everybody got out of that strike okay. My counterpart, Jamie Whitehill at American Ballet Theater, had a production of Sleeping Beauty coming in from overseas to do at the Orange County Performing Arts Center in Costa Mesa, and their stuff did not get through. And so he had to send 6 tractor trailers cross country from New Jersey full of who knows what. to cobble together a production. So when we found out that Oregon Ballet Theater had built it, we asked for pictures right away. In fact, we asked for pictures before they even finished building it because it was just much safer. It was less expensive, and it was much safer to have it on the ground instead of on a boat. Let's see. Firebird. Carmina Burana is such a great operation to the Phoenix Symphony. It might be. The Phoenix Symphony has a chorus. Of course, Carmina Burana has a huge full chorus, and it would be epic. Again, I would say if you would like to see Carmina Burana with Ballet Arizona, you need to send a note to Eve Anderson because he will be the one to make that decision. Rebecca Hubbard, welcome. I miss Ballet Under the Stars. We miss Ballet Under the Stars only because we haven't done it yet. I don't know what community you are in, so perhaps you are speaking of one of the communities that didn't get it every year once we had to kind of constrict the schedule a little bit. Last year, we changed our schedule to move the mixed repertoire from spring into the fall in September. And as a result of that, our 2 weeks of Ballet Under the Stars were reduced to one. And so it meant that only 4 parks would have availability to do it every year instead of 6. So there's a little bit of competition for that now. We still are looking forward to Ballet Under the Stars this September, unless the current circumstances were to prevent us from some reason for doing that. But at this point, we are still very hopeful that there will be Ballet Under the Stars coming to a park near you in September of 2020. If I were granted, Heather, if I were granted an unlimited budget, what would I revamp at the School of Ballet Arizona first? At the School of Ballet Arizona, well, the only thing that I would have any say over would be the lighting plot that I actually designed that's in the Dorrance Theater. We have one of the very last all incandescent courts, all conventional, non-LED, old-fashioned, state-of-the-art old-fashioned, because it was like one of the last years that anybody had to make the choice to buy that kind of equipment instead of doing the newer equipment. I would look at replacing the light plot in the Dorrance Theater with an all LED setup that could do color changing. It would save us a lot of power. It would move us into the 21st century and give us more flexibility of what we could do in the space, because I designed a really great dance lighting 101 light plot to do basic dance in the Dorrance Theater, but that's it. It's basic dance. And I would love to add to that or replace it entirely with all LED fixtures, brand new technology. There's nothing else at the School of Ballet Arizona that I would really have a say about. Maria Simonetti is our new school director, and I'm sure she has a lengthy laundry list of things that she'd like to spend money on, but I cannot speak to that. Yes, that is why it's so hot in there during performances. One of the reasons. The HVAC in the building is another, and that's a much longer story, which is going to give me a good segue to the next question in a moment. But yes, incandescent fixtures produce a considerable amount of heat. Each one of them is 575 watts, and there's about 200 of them in the Dorrance Theater. And so in a really bright light cue, that does produce a great deal of heat that stays in the room. You are absolutely right. So Dave Tompkins is asking, what was the process to build and open the amazing facility that is home to Baz? Yes, it is amazing. I am very, very proud and pleased to have been a part of the entire process from almost its inception. I was not around in 2006 when the city of Phoenix held an election and passed a bond issue for cultural facilities in the city of Phoenix. The administration at Ballet Arizona made an application for that process at the time and got us into the granting process. And so when the bond issue was passed, there was $3.2 million in the pot for us. At the time, we were in bed with the opera because their operations were running a little different. Their main offices were still in Tucson when that happened. And their intent was to share a smaller space with us. They were share a small portion of a larger space that we would occupy most of. We ultimately couldn't find a building that would house both of us, and so we went our separate ways, and we ended up getting the place that is on Washington Street. I believe, Dwight Wolf, you're on, so you can weigh in on this too. I believe we had been looking for some time, and there was some risk. We hadn't found an appropriate building. There's a lot of issues that are ours specifically for how a space works because of studio space, because you need unbroken space without columns. And it turns out most of the big open spaces they build, like, if you try to go into a supermarket or a big box store or something like that, the roof supports are on 30-foot centers, and so you can't have a big enough space for a ballet studio without there being columns in the space. And that wasn't going to work for us. So it was really difficult finding a pre-built building that fit the specifications to be able to give us 40 by 50, 50 by 60, and in the case of Dorrance, 50 by 80 foot studio spaces. And that was one of the key elements of what we were looking for. It was difficult to find, and being unable to find it for the first couple of years. I mean, I got here in 2008 and the process was still ongoing. And by 2010, we still hadn't found an appropriate building. And I believe Dwight was riding past on the light rail, the building that we occupy today, and saw the signage on it that it was for sale. And went, we should check that place out. And so we all did trundle over there, and the building was owned by Target Corp at that point. It had previously been owned by a furniture company, and it was their warehouse and administrative offices and storage space, and the actual factory too. They were actually, there was a paint booth in there and a whole section where they were building furniture in the backside of what is now our building. But in any event, they had gone out of business, I guess, and Target Corp owned the building. The city of Phoenix ended up purchasing the building from Target Corp for under $1 million of the $3.2 million that was in the bond issue for us. And then we raised the rest of the money to build it out. We designed it in 2012 and broke ground in late 2012. And we moved into the building in in June. We did it in two phases. We opened the summer intensive in 4 studios with the rest of the building still sealed off and under construction. And that was in June of 2013. And then in July, we ended up bringing everything else over, and we closed down the space at Indian School and 36th Street. And that was one of the happier days that I've ever had, was not having to go back to the space on Indian School anymore. For any of you who ever worked there, you know what I mean. Production of the last decade. Shea Duria. I hope I pronounced your last name right. What is my most memorable production in the last decade? I think for me that would have to be Napoli, and for all the right reasons and for all of the scary reasons. It was very, very close to not happening with the scenery, and my favorite, I guess, all sorts of things stand out for me, but here's a moment that stands out. One of our finest and greatest donors and a former board chair, Carol Schilling, actually invited myself and my girlfriend Teresa to attend our gala that year at her table. She had one of the big tables that seats like 8 or 10 people, and she invited us as 2 of her guests. And that gala took place just 2 weeks before we were supposed to open Napoli. And I still was not sure whether we were going to have the cargo or not. It was still being held up. The ship had still not landed. It was not unloaded yet. It was a real question, and we had already put the backup plans into play so that we would be ready if we needed to have some stuff come to us from other companies. And so we're at the gala, and it was a Napoli-themed gala, and everyone is all talking about how wonderful Napoli is going to be. And I got to sit there at a table full of donors going, oh, yes, it's going to be wonderful. I can't wait until you see it. Knowing all the time that we didn't know if we were actually going to have the real production or not. We would have put something on, but thankfully it all worked out, and we got to put on the show, and it was a real treat to be able to do this big classic treasure of classical ballet for the first time in the United States. No other American company had ever done the complete piece before, and so that probably would be the one. Am I proud of where our costume shop is now, being able to build full productions from scratch? Yes, absolutely. We've come a long way in the costume shop. When I first came here in 2008, Leonore Texador, who is now our costume director, was the manager of the costume shop at that point. She had another person that was her supervisor, and most of the rest of the people were volunteers. It was an almost all volunteer costume shop. And so over the years, we have built it up to the place that it is now, largely thanks to Leonore and her skill and expertise. And we have built in the last couple of years a couple of really gorgeous productions. We're really very proud of them. Absolutely. Let's see. Anybody new? Thank you, Baz people, by the way, for feeding me good questions. Thank you so much. I don't think I've missed. I think I've got everybody. Okay, I'll go back to my list here since I don't see any new questions for the moment. What is the process like to secure rights for choreography and music, etc.? How many different rights do we need to get? This is an excellent question. We cooked it up ourselves. That's why it's so good. We have people in offices who come up with things like this. So there's choreographic rights at the outset. If Eve Anderson decides that he would like to do a ballet that has been choreographed by someone else, an existing ballet, or if we were to want to commission a new ballet by another new choreographer that wasn't Eve Anderson, the choreographic license is the first place that you need to go because that's the art itself. That person, if it's a new piece, has to choose a piece of music. If it's an existing piece, they will already have chosen, obviously, the piece of music and will be able to give that information. But once securing at least the commitment from a choreographer or their agent to do choreography, the next step is then to follow up on the music rights. If it's an existing piece, they can tell you what the music is and hopefully give some information, but oftentimes we have to do all the research on our own. And there are two sides to the rights of the music. There is the music itself, the piece of music, what's written on the page, that's publishing rights. And then there's the recording, presuming that you're going to be performing to recorded music. So, for instance, another example I like to use from the same season as Napoli, actually, in 2015. Our dancer, Nyan Iovino, decided that the piece that he was going to do that year would be to a piece of music by Pink Floyd called Echoes. It's off of an album called Metal. It's a 23 minute long track, foot long. It's a 23-minute long track, and he was going to choreograph a ballet to the track in its entirety. And it took the better part of a year to search out both sides because on the music publishing side, the rights had already been bought and sold down the road several times since the original recording came out. And so the bands say, and it was a little watered down, and the United States rights were controlled by a company that is part of the Universal Music empire, ultimately. And so tracking my way to the music rights and securing that part of it took about 3 or 4 months because I had a couple of dead ends along the way. On the recording side, for the actual Pink Floyd, we didn't find out that the band had denied us the right to use their recording, which is the only recording, until basically about the same time as that gala that I told you, sitting at the table. I think sometime that day or the day before, I had gotten the email from the record company saying, yeah, the band says, no, you can't use that. And so what do you do? Well, what we did is the same thing as what you oftentimes see in a Hollywood movie, because if you ever see a movie that's got a song that you know, but it's not by the original artist, it's covered by someone else, that's why they do that. They got the rights to the song, but they didn't get the rights to the recording. And so they put a band in a studio and they make their own recording of the same song. They have the rights to do that, and then they can use that recording because they own it. We managed to find a local Pink Floyd cover band that was really quite good. I was surprised, and it worked out great. They had one of their band members actually had his own basement recording studio. And so rather than having to go to Las Vegas or Los Angeles and hire a bunch of musicians at those kind of rates and pay for those kind of recording studio rates, we got a real bargain basement, pardon the pun, bargain basement deal with this local group that actually did a great recording. I have a copy of it myself because we're not allowed to use it for anything. but I play it in my car every once in a while because they did pretty good service to the music. It sounds really good. I'm a Pink Floyd fan, I know. What do we got here? What is the biggest project we take on each season that the general public probably wouldn't ever know about? Jordan, you might be stumping me a little bit because, of course, biggest answers are almost always answered by the Nutcracker. Although DBG comes a close second because we're building an entire theater out in the middle of the desert. But things that people don't even know about, that's hard to say because people see all of our shows. I mean, for me, that means people know about it, so they're seeing what we do. I think Alexandra Papazian has made some great strides in moving our educational stuff forward, and so we've actually got a whole bunch of momentum and activity. Oh, pardon me. A whole lot of momentum and activity around education stuff going on in the schools. And I bet a lot of people probably don't know about that. So tell everyone you know, we're doing a lot of stuff in the schools. Tina Falsita is asking, welcome to the conversation, Tina. Yeah, she's asking, are we doing any type of career training, technical training, or collaborations for young people interested in learning sewing, electrical, photography, or any other skills? Are we offering any programs? We have been trying with some small amount of success to have an internship program with ASU, with their theater program and with their Department of Dance. And there's prospects there that always seem promising, but then they get very busy doing their own in-house stuff at the university, and we don't get a lot of interest, it turns out. We are working through the Arizona chapter of USITT, which is the United States Institute for Theatrical Technology. They're going to try to set up a couple of high school training programs, kind of as a vocational training thing, to try to move people into the union as trained stagehands so that we can breathe some new life and new blood into our stagehands union here, which is always a good thing. And so we have said we would like to be involved in that. We are involved with the training program with the union as well. There's a stage and exhibitions training trust that all of the companies that use the union stagehands contribute to. And as it happens, I am one of the trustees of the training trust. And so I happily accepted that when I was offered because it gives me a voice. I have a voice in how those funds are being spent and what kind of training we're giving to our professional stagehands here in Phoenix as well. Let's see. We got a few new things coming in. Let me catch up. You got it. Everyone's going on at once. Terry Seretis, I hope I pronounced your name right. With respect to Mambas, how difficult was that to produce? Actually, mostly not that bad. Once we decided we were going with live band, which came about totally by surprise, I was working with record companies on all the recordings, and Nyan went out and saw a band and got talking to the band leader afterwards, and they had been playing some Mamba music in their set, and he brought them to our attention. We all got together and set up an audition for them, and the band leader, Josiel, put together quite a decent little band, and so that made everything, it changed it day and night, basically. It made the program much more exciting, and a bit of a challenge because of the way we introduced it at the last minute to just make sure we had everything we needed at the theater, equipment-wise. But that part of it wasn't that difficult. And then the publishing side, again, the publishing side to music rights is usually much easier than the recordings. The recording's the hard part. So once we weren't using recorded music, it gets a lot easier. What does our stage manager do? She manages stages. Laura Cadu, our production stage manager, is one of the best ever. I've worked with a lot of stage managers in my career, and she is really one of the best. I'm bragging because she's one of my best hires ever, but she runs it like a lion backstage. She's fantastic. For those of you who don't know what a stage manager does, They coordinate all of the details of the different technical departments for the actual production itself. And so they're the ones that make sure that all the props are going to be in the right place and the scenery gets set in the right places and that the light cues happen at the right time and the scenery gets changed at the right time. They literally book in front of them during the show, and they literally say standby light cue 1 and rail cue. Rail is the thing with the ropes that makes scenery move. And they say, she says go, and they do it when she says go. And if they do it before she says go, they get in trouble. And if they don't do it when she says go, they get in trouble. But if they do it right when she says go, it looks like a perfect show, and that is what she is best at. And stage management is one of those unsung jobs because it lands at the point between administration and artistic where they come together. Because all of the dancers are, asking her pointed questions about what's going on, and all of us are looking down going, get things done, and that's why I wouldn't want to be a stage manager anymore. Oh, I see a whole other side conversation going on. That's nice, talking about stuff with Alexandra. That's good. I think I covered the publishing and recording stuff enough. I'm going to move along to the next thing until another cool thing comes along. Oh, here, great. We landed on, we've already done it. What is my favorite ballet to work on and why? I don't have a recurring favorite ballet to work on. And I don't really have a favorite ballet. How many people need to work backstage on the production side to put a performance on? Good question. It depends on which production. A small mixed rep at the Orpheum Theater that's all lights and tights and no scenery at all, we can run that with a skeleton crew of probably 7 guys. Because the minimum crew pretty much in any union theater that you have is you have a head carpenter, he's in charge of the stage. You have a head electrician, he's in charge of the lights. You have a head audio, he's in charge of the sound. And you have a head rail who's in charge of the ropes. And they actually, even though they're a head, they really work for the head carpenter. He's kind of like their assistant. And then some theaters also require a head of wardrobe, but our contract doesn't because the wardrobe union was a separate local when we first had our CBA. And so we're not required to have a union wardrobe head. We can just work with Leonore running things at the theater. And so you start with those 4 basic ones, and then we add a couple of, an audio, the head of audio, to run the sound console, and then a couple of follow spot operators, because the head electrician will be the one running the lighting console. And so 7 people, you can run a small show if nothing is changing except the main curtain opening and closing, and there's nothing else to it. Nutcracker as the obvious other choice. We load in with a crew of 34 stagehands, of union stagehands, not counting any wardrobe people. So we have about another dozen wardrobe people. And then we have another half dozen people that are working directly for Ballet Arizona to supervise the union people. And then we have our entire company of dancers and the entire Phoenix Symphony and 3 casts of kids. And so by the time you get done, when it's at its biggest, we've got about 200 people working. And the backstage crew for the Nutcracker, the standard running crew is, I want to say, 26 union stagehands, which doesn't include any of the wardrobe crew. And so plus another 3 of our supervisors on the run crew, and plus about 8 wardrobe and makeup ladies. So it's a pretty big deal. That's a much, much larger crew. Have we ever had to call off a show due to weather at the DBG? Yes. Yes, we have in the middle of a show. In fact, it was the opening night of the first round, I believe. The very first performance of round. We got little light rain and wind. It was actually wind more than anything else. And we actually let the dancers go up on stage and test it and feel and see if they were going to get blown over. And they all decided, okay, let's do a show. And about 40 minutes into it, the rain started. And so we did 40 minutes of a 50-minute show, and then we had to stop. Ballet Under the Stars, we've had it happen more frequently. We've had to stop several shows and outright cancel in advance a number of shows because of inclement weather. Because outdoors is pretty scary. There's lots of things you can do if you have a roof, but even in ballet, and I know this because I've done ballet in outdoor amphitheaters when I was on tour, and it's not a pretty thing. There's a crazy touring story for you, since I gave myself a segue for a second. When I was on tour with Stars of the Bolshoi Ballet for Columbia Artist Management in the mid 1990s, there was a point at which we actually were booked to play at Fiddler's Green, one of the amphitheaters in Denver, Colorado. It's a rock and roll shed. It's the equivalent of the Pavilion here in Phoenix. And we were there in late March. And so I arrived the night before to focus the lights, because you can't focus the lights during the daytime in an amphitheater. And so it was pouring down rain when we focused the lights the night before, and it was 65 degrees at performance time on the day of the show. And we had a whole bunch of big heat blowers blowing. We were heating Colorado with heat blowers, all outdoors. It didn't work. It was really pretty silly. One of the sillier things I've ever done. Amanda Hidalgo, is the Orpheum Theater really haunted? Well, if you believe in ghosts, they say that it is. Every theater I've ever worked at has a ghost, and so I'm always skeptical. When will we all be back together as a happy family? That is an excellent question. That's the $1,000,000 question that we're all wondering. I'm sure everybody's, because of all the announcements we've made, that the city of Phoenix has us locked out of our venues through at least May 11th. And while they haven't announced anything officially past that, I have it privately from the convention center that it is unlikely that anything will be allowed back in there until summer or later. And beyond that, we'll just all have to see. We're all riding this COVID-19 wave together. We're certainly doing a lot of contingency planning. Like the Mel Brooks song goes, hope for the best and expect the worst. And so we're kind of trying to cut that line as a management team and as the staff of Ballet Arizona, and try to be hopeful that we can do as much of our programming as possible, but being cautious about what's realistic. And goodness only knows. We're all hoping for the best. When will we do Swan Lake again? Asks Andy Murray. Hi, Andy. Welcome. I'm not sure. It's within the 5-year plan as a maybe. I mean, all of the classics in the classical canon, and Swan Lake near the top of the list because it's one of the obvious A-list ballets. It's right up there with Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty. Probably those 3 ballets are the most obvious of what people would call the A-list from a marketing standpoint. So it's always kind of at the forefront of, gee, how many years has it been since we did Swan Lake, and when can we do it again? But it's a touchy thing nowadays, especially with the way entertainment is. Even taking away COVID-19 and taking away all of what's going on right now, entertainment has changed so much up to this point that you can't just keep doing the same classic ballets every 3 years or so and expect people to be as excited about showing up. So it's a challenge to do the timing right, to say, okay, it's been 5 years or 4 years or 6 years or whatever feels right. There's marketing research that goes into it. There's a lot of things, but you can be sure that you'll see it again at some point because it's Swan Lake. How do you not? What is my favorite production that I have ever put together? Asks Rachel Stern. Wow, that's tough. I've been at this for over 30 years now, so that's a lot of productions. I got into this doing theater of the spoken word, Off-Off-Broadway and Off-Broadway in New York City back in the 1980s. And that's when I was deciding whether to be an actor or be a stage guy, and I took the safer choice because I like, having a roof over my head and, steady meals. And I'm not, though, I'm performing for you now, but as it's not the thing I want to do every night of my life. So, but there's a lot of productions. There's a lot of those theater shows that I did back when I was in my 20s that were really fun, that kind of stood out as favorites for a long time. I did some really, really cool things on tour. I've done a lot of really fun things here at Ballet Arizona. I guess that's the easiest place to go for, I've been here for 12 years and counting now. So we have done several new productions since I've been here. And now that I'm kind of talking and thinking out loud my way through it, I'm going to just say probably the two new productions in the last 2 years. I'm going to divide it between them kind of evenly for different reasons. But the new production of Firebird, because it brought us into the world of doing video projection for the first time, and I loved what Michael Kors did with that. I loved what Eve Anderson did with it, because I've always thought that the Firebird music sounded like science fiction music from Star Trek, and it never really is. There's all kinds of stuff in there that sounds like it's from a sci-fi movie, because all of the composers who wrote that stuff were listening to Stravinsky, and so they like that, and it sounds just like Firebird. And so his whole science fiction take on Firebird, I thought, was great. It transfers perfectly from a mythical story to a sci-fi story. And then Midsummer Night's Dream, again, because we got to create it ourselves, because we're really getting deeper into working with the newer technology and projection, and finding ourselves getting more at home with it and more comfortable with it. And just because I really like Eve Anderson's ballet. When we first added that to our repertoire back in 2008-9, we were originally looking at doing the Balanchine production. We were talking to PNB about renting their scenery and costumes, and that's tied by contract to the Balanchine choreography. And as we were getting closer to, needing to pull the trigger on that, he was watching the videotape, and we're stopping it on all the big core scenes and literally counting heads on the screen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're not big enough. And the Balanchine Trust wasn't going to let us change the choreography because we were a smaller company. And so he realized then that he had to come up with his own, and got set about it with the Shakespeare volume in his lap and in the studio with him as he went. And I've always kind of thought that it was an underrated production, in part because we had to produce it on the cheap. And so we rented a crappy production from Orlando Ballet that's one of the old beat up 1980s things. And we barely even used any of it because Eve hated all of it when we got it here. And he looked at it and said, "Oh, no, forget about it. I don't want to use any of that." And so we really did it very kind of simply. And I think that it kind of slipped out of people's minds. But I always really liked that production. I thought that it was really very clever, and that he actually took it in, and the story all runs in the right order, and all the important parts are included. One of my favorite things about that is that he includes the actual performance of Pyramus and Thisbe at the wedding. No other ballet production of Midsummer Night's Dream has that. They have all the rehearsals, but because Eve added music, he didn't just use the Mendelssohn that is Midsummer Night's Dream. He added to it, and he added about another 20, 25 minutes, enough to fit in the important stuff that wasn't included in even Balanchine's production, because he did it to the original music. So that'll be my answer. Do I ever dream about my own venue? Well, we already have one. It's called the Dorrance Theater. I helped design it, so I guess in a way you could say I dreamed up the Dorrance Theater. Okay, no, I can't take credit for that. Eve Anderson dreamed up the Dorrance Theater when we looked at the building on Washington Street. We had the idea that we were looking for 6 ballet studios that were all bigger than what we had at Indian School, where we only had 3 pretty limited ballet studios. And when we did the site survey of the building on Washington Street, Eve walked around, his eyes kind of getting wider, and realized that we had enough space that we could create a black box studio that could accommodate, about what did we do, which is 300 people, to do our own things. So we have our own venue. Do I dream about my own bigger venue? No. Now, running a venue is a whole different set of building responsibilities, which I have anyway at Ballet Arizona, but I wouldn't want to run our building and a separate venue, because running a venue is quite a thing. I actually thought that when I got off the road that would be what it was that I would be doing. And I'm very much happier to have stayed in a producing organization than running a presenting venue instead. Let's see, there's nothing new. And as I look at the clock, what I realize is it's 6 o'clock. Folks, we filled an entire hour on my very first one of these ever. How did that happen? Oh my God. You've had great questions. Thank you very much for joining. I hope I have answered them all to all of your satisfaction, or at least to your entertainment. And I hope that the car crashes were entertaining enough. And maybe we'll do this again sometime. So, with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off and thank you all for joining. Take care, guys. Bye bye.